The Sodor Lights, written and told by Kiefer Adams. During his time on the Fat Controller's railway, Toby the tram engine had seen many things. But Toby had yet to see one of the most beautiful events on the island. The others knew it as the Sodor Lights. Early one morning, Toby was waiting in his siding at Tidmouth Sheds for the Fat Controller to give him his orders for the day. Thomas and Percy were already awake. "I can't believe today's the day," Thomas beamed happily. "Why?" asked Percy. "The Sodor Lights, of course," replied Thomas. "I've been looking forward to it since it last came to the island." Toby was puzzled. "What are the Sodor Lights, Thomas?" he asked. "The Sodor Lights is a very rare event," replied Thomas. "It only happens once in a lifetime. Or two, if you'd like to say so." "Yes, but what is it?" Toby inquired. "Well, I can't say," replied Thomas. "You'll have to find out for yourself." "It's not what I think it is it?" asked Percy. "Because when I first arrived on the island, Edward used to tell stories about it." "It could be," said Thomas cheekily. "But like I said, I'm not spoiling anything. The Sodor Lights is a beautiful event that should be seen with your own eyes." Toby remained puzzled. The Fat Controller soon arrived to give the engines their jobs for the day. Toby was to make his way to the farms and make a few deliveries for the likes of Farmer McColl, Farmer Finney and Farmer Trotter. Toby was on his way to McColl Farm when he noticed that Edward was up ahead. Some sheep had escaped in a nearby field, but Edward didn't want to shoo them off the line on his own. He was relieved when Toby pulled up. He rang his bell, blew his whistle, which he only ever used to move animals off the line, and gave a great cloud of steam when neither tactic worked. The sheep were slowly making their way back to the field, but Edward could tell that Toby was troubled. "You've heard about the Sodor Lights then?" he asked. "Yes, indeed," replied Toby. "But Thomas said it's more of a surprise than anything else. Percy mentioned that you know all about it." Edward smiled. "The Sodor Lights haven't been on the island since Thomas first arrived," Edward said. "But why would he say it's a rare event?" Toby pondered. "Well, you'll just have to find out for yourself, old friend," replied Edward. "You may realise what Thomas means when it gets a little darker." Once the sheep were all off the line, Edward puffed away. But as Toby made his way to the farms, he was more troubled than ever. Toby worked hard all day, and by the end of it, all of his deliveries from the farms had been carried through. He had only just backed into his shed when the Fat Controller arrived in his car. "Good evening, Toby," he said. "Don't settle down for the moment. I've got a bit of an emergency." "Yes, sir," said Toby. "Terence was working in the fields today, but broke down on his way home," said the Fat Controller. "I need an engine to take some parts for him to be repaired." Toby was rather worried. I'm more than happy to go, sir," he said. "Excellent," said the Fat Controller. "But what about the Sodor Lights?" cried Toby. "I won't miss it, will I?" "I promise you, Toby, you'll see the Sodor Lights before you even get back," said the Fat Controller. He then returned to his car. Toby set out to the yards to collect some trucks and went to the depot to collect some parts for Terence. He then set off into the night. Toby puffed cautiously along the line. His lamp shone brightly and he was filled with determination. "Terence is important to all the farms on the island," he said to himself. "We can't leave him stranded." Toby's driver and fireman agreed. The more Toby puffed along the line, the more his confidence boosted. He was no longer interested in finding out what the Sodor Lights really were about. He just wanted to make sure that Terence was repaired and back home safe. Before long, Toby spotted the tractor half a mile up the line. "Oh, thank goodness you've come, Toby," smiled Terence. "I was afraid I'd be stuck here all night." Toby was very grateful. Farmer Finney and Toby's driver and fireman set to work in fixing Terence. As they did, Toby noticed that Terence was looking up at the night sky. "What's going on?" he said. "Is Harold on duty again?" "No," replied Terence. "Look up, Toby." When Toby did look up, he was in for a surprise. The starry night sky had now been replaced with a wave of colourful lights that danced across the night sky. "Bless my bell!" he exclaimed. "What's that?" "Have you not heard of the Sodor Lights, Toby?" said Terence. Toby's eyes lit up with delight. "So those are the Sodor Lights," he gasped. He remembered everything that Edward and Thomas had said. "No wonder they wanted to keep it a surprise," he said. "It's beautiful." "It truly is," remarked Terence. "I can see now why it's called a rare event." Upon seeing the Sodor Lights, Toby felt much better. Once Terence was repaired, Toby collected a flat truck from the yards and took him back to his farm. Afterwards, he made his way home. The Sodor Lights were still dancing in the sky, with colourful shades of green, blue and pink. Toby couldn't help but smile to himself. He felt truly honoured to have seen the Sodor Lights, and he had to admit it was one of the most beautiful sights he had ever seen.